As Rabbi Kornsgold will confirm if you check with her afterwards, when you graduate from rabbinical school, they hand you a small slip of paper that has on it God's direct number. And they tell you this is only for emergencies, and you can go your whole rabbinic career without ever dialing the number. But once you become emeritus, there's a little more leniency. And so this week I thought I should check in. So I called and I said, Kodesh Baruch Hu, how you doing? And God said, to be honest, I'm really upset. I said, why? God said, no one talks about me. Do I have to put my name on the ballot to get talked about? And I felt a little guilty. I said, well, actually, the truth is, I understand what you mean, because this Shabbos I was going to talk about how people should feel about Doge and whether they should buy a Tesla. And God said, I gave you a Torah. What, do I have to talk on Signal for you to pay attention to me? That was when I knew God was playing hardball. And I said, what do you want? Tell me what you want. God said, I want you to talk about me. Don't give a sermon about politics. Don't give a sermon about online. I don't have a social media presence. I don't want you to give a sermon about what people are doing on their phones. Talk about me. So I waited, because, you know, one of the rules they tell you is you can't hang up on God. You have to wait for God to hang up. And I said, I promise, I will talk about you. And God said, thank you, and hung up. So I looked at the Parsha, and I thought, boy, I hope there's something there I can talk about. And I saw that in the Parsha, what happens is that it recounts all the gifts that the Israelites give to the Mishkan, to the temporary tabernacle, and that Bezalel, who designs it, assembles it, great artist, and Moshe finishes, and then the presence of God dwells in the tabernacle. And I thought, good, we get to the presence of God. Now the question is, how do you get there? Not for me, because I have the number, but for all of you. And unsurprisingly, the answer is in Eve's bat mitzvah speech this morning. Because she talked about all the gifts that were given to the sanctuary. And if you looked at the Haftarah, the same thing is true, which is Solomon does not build the temple with the treasury that he inherits from King David. Instead, he builds it out of gifts. And I realized that in order for there to be God in one's life, there has to be space. And the way you make space is by creating some kind of opening through some kind of giving. And that people who give are people who have a sense of God in their lives. And this is unsurprising because, you know, according to the Kabbalah, how did God make the world? God withdrew and made space so that there would be room for us, a halal panui, an empty void. And into that void, God created the world so that we would have a space where we could exist. So if God has to make space for us, what does that tell us? That we have to make space for God. And I think that was God's message in the conversation we had, which is as long as your life is filled with everything else, as long as all you think about is what's in the newspaper or what's online, you don't have space for me. The Kotzker Rebbe, asking where does God dwell, answered, after his students said, oh, God dwells everywhere, he said, no. God dwells wherever we let God in. But in order to let God in, you have to have space. You have to take time in your day when you're not thinking about all the other things that crowd in on us. It was much easier for our ancestors, because one of the things that we know is in our world, you never have to be bored. You can just pull out your phone at any moment, standing in line, sitting in shul. I've seen it. But in fact, boredom is the beginning of opening a space. Boredom is when you're not filled with everything else, and then you have to fill it yourself. And as long as we are always full, there's no place for God to find the way in. Emerson, talking about how difficult it was to be rich, said it's hard to carry a full cup. Right? We all know this from Starbucks. You get a full cup and it's not good. You have to pour a little out so that you can carry it. And the same is true in life. If you're full, there's no space for anything else, and it's very difficult to navigate through the world. So even though my conversation with God was somewhat imaginary, the lesson was real. The Baal Shem Tov once, when someone came to him and asked, why is it that when I was young I had such a sense of God and now I don't? Answered, when we're young, it's just like when we're young with our parents and they're teaching us how to walk and they stand right next to us with every step. That's what God does when you're young. But as you get older, God moves away to teach you how to walk towards God, just as a parent moves away to teach the child how to walk towards them. But the paradox of walking towards God is that if you make the empty space, God fills it. That it isn't an active seeking God always, although you can do that too, but sometimes it's a breath, it's a moment, it's an opening, it's a putting down the phone, putting aside the screen, closing your eyes, opening your mind and your heart and your soul. If you do that, you might be astonished to discover that you don't need the secret slip of paper to have a conversation with God. Shabbat Shalom.